okay? Who wants to actually hear? All right, thank you all for coming. We thought we'd take a minute and just introduce the Monroe Capital team. There have been some additions and changes and things like that, so we just wanted to make sure you all knew who you're getting emails from or phone calls. So Paul Adams is the founder and president of Monroe Capital. Deb Schneckenberger is with the accounting department. Gary Robinson deals a lot with the borrowers. That's me, Bridget Martin. I deal on the investor side and pretty much whatever Paul asks me to do. Melanie Borman, also in accounting. Quinn Sturge in accounting. Sarah is also on the deal side. Jen is, where is Jen? So Jen, you may have seen Jen, who is expecting twins in a few weeks. And really appreciates me calling her out right now. So Jen will be on maternity leave for a little bit, and Adam, who is next to her, there's Glenna, I'll get back to Adam in a minute, but Glenna will be the person you'll be hearing from in Jen's absence. So Jen and Glenna work on the investor and the deal side both. Adam is our computer guru, and he's sitting over here, and he's the reason that everything's working right now. And Gary Casera, many of you know, Gary works with us on consulting basis, does construction projects and other things like that. So that just gives you an idea of the Monroe Capital team, so you know we put the names and the faces together. So again, thank you all for coming. I just wanted to start off a little bit to give an overview of where the private placement is at, talk about some of our goals for 2019, then I'll turn it over to Gary Robinson. He'll talk about some of the lending aspects of the business. Preet Sabharwal is here tonight, and he is with SAB Capital, which is part of Marcus and Millichap, and he's going to talk about net leases and some of the market trends. And then we'll finish it up with an overview from Paul Adams. So I would ask that you hold all questions until the very end, and we'll address them all at once just so that the flow can continue. Okay, so you can see here that our, this really just illustrates what the fund has done. We've had several funds. New York Income Partners 4 is currently closed, but it shows you the difference between the fund, what the S&P does, and the 10-year Treasury. And the fund is the blue line, and that has been a continual, steady return. Another way to look at that is, again, in a bar chart, what the average returns have been in each of those markets, excuse me, in each of those buckets. For New York Income Partners 4, it is anticipated that the additional interest this year will pay out just under 1 point, and that's not 100% verified because the audit needs to complete, and that should be by the end of February. So as you always do, you'll hear from me if you're in the fund about what the additional interest is that is being paid, but there will be an additional interest component this year. Okay, so what is different in 2019, and what are we looking to do? So some of the things that we're trying to do that we've talked about previously is diversification. So the diversification that we want to do from a lending perspective is expanding our lead generation. And so some of that is direct target marketing. So we want to make sure that we are getting the word out to the people that can bring in new deals to us and diversify that way. Another way we do that is conference participation. Gary will be going to a conference in Florida in March. I don't know how he got that one, and I got the one in New York in February, but whatever. So we do that, and we go out and meet different, whether it's brokers or multifamily developers, whatever it is, we try to expand our base of business. Networking, we belong to different organizations and do that. Also, another thing that's important is for us as a company is community involvement, and that's not really about generating business. There is some name recognition there, but as a company, we all really feel it's important to give back to the community. It's a great city to live in, and we like to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to support those that don't have as many advantages as we do. So having said that, I'm going to turn this over to Gary Robinson.
Thank you, Bridget. As always, Bridget, thank you for everything you do for Monroe Capital. We have stayed very true, and a lot of you have heard this over the years and in some of the presentations we've done, but we've stayed very true to our business model over the years. We are a commercial real estate lender. We do not finance the acquisition or purchase of single-family owner-occupied homes. We strictly deal in the commercial real estate arena. This, again, gives you an idea of the types of properties we finance. Commercial office buildings, medical office buildings. We do a lot in the multifamily area. Hotels, including the property you're in right now is a property that we financed when it was acquired, and we worked with the developer through the renovations of the property. Student housing, land development, residential development, industrial manufacturing. This map will give you a little bit of an idea. As many of you know, when we do a loan, oftentimes we secure additional collateral to help secure the loan. The states that are in blue, and I think that's blue, thank you, represent the states that we currently have properties located in that are a part of the loans that we have outstanding. And it's 21 states currently. Our financing still ranges from $50,000 to $11 million, although I'm happy to say we do literally nothing in the $50,000 arena anymore. Everything we do is short-term. A typical loan from Monroe Capital is 1 year, and it is interest-only payments for that year. So the business model we have is short-term lending, interest-only payments, typical term 1 year, commercial real estate only. This will give you a little idea how over the years our average loan amount is fluctuated, and you know, in 2008 our average loan was $1,985,000. It just fluctuates year to year depending on the types of properties, type of loan requests we're approached with. This will give you an idea of the current loan information for the loans we have outstanding and exactly where we fall, commercial being a large part of our business, of course, multifamily, land development, single-family residences. As I said, we don't do single-family residents that are going to be owner-occupied, but oftentimes people are buying single-family residences as a business and then renting out the properties. Just to give you an idea, we always like to show some of the properties that we were loaning against or the deals that we were involved with throughout 2018. This is an office building in Stamford, Connecticut. It has underground parking. This particular loan, we have the first mortgage lien on this property as additional collateral. We picked up a 240-unit mobile home park in Gainesville, Florida. So even though the borrower and the collateral we had a mortgage lien on were in Connecticut, this particular person owned real estate in 3 different states, and we secured a property in Gainesville, Florida as additional collateral. This is Brockton, Massachusetts. It's a large FedEx distribution facility. Once again, we have a first mortgage lien on this property. This was a fairly large loan for us. It was $11.5 million. That's a net lease type of situation. You're going to hear more about net lease lending in a few minutes, but in this particular instance, it's a triple net lease. Tenant pays for all expenses. We have a first mortgage lien on the property. CVS Pharmacy, Thibodaux, Louisiana, again. Net lease situation, CVS pays all the expenses for the building. We have a first mortgage lien, short-term loan. Very interesting loan for us. This is the White House, as you all know. But, we're trying to get the tenants out of it right now. But, at any rate, this is sorry, no politics. This is a property in Washington, D.C. that was actually purchased by a gentleman who is he's a U.S. resident, resides in Florida, but is very active with his native country. And this property was purchased in Washington, just outside of the Capital District, and it's used for people who travel to the United States from his country for whatever purpose. They're put up in this property. This was a very interesting loan for us. The house was purchased for $16 million. Ordinarily, it's not a loan that we would tend to look at, except in this particular instance, the owner of the property put $10 million into the purchase of the property. A loan amount was $6 million. So we felt we were very well secured given the value of the property. Daytona Beach, Florida. The property that we are primarily involved with is not shown because it's just a piece of land. And it's a piece of land that is opposite the marina. It's in Daytona Beach. It's being developed for a independent living apartment complex. And the additional collateral was the apartment complex that you see on the left side. Again, we're not a big land lender. As Paul says often, land loans are nothing more than a loan against a piece of dirt. So anytime we look at a land loan or land development loan, we are always going to look for additional collateral. In this particular instance, we also secured an apartment complex in Daytona Beach. Buffalo, New York, very large property, historic area, Elmwood Avenue area in Buffalo. Purchased by a repeat borrower of ours, being developed into 9 apartments currently. Erie, Pennsylvania. This is the modern tulip building. At one time, this entire complex was used by a manufacturing company, as in many areas around the country. It's been acquired. It was actually acquired by 2 doctors, and the property has been completely renovated with commercial on the interior of the property, and a lot of retail on the outside of the property. Again, in this instance, it was the second time we had actually loaned against this property. It came to us about 4 years ago, and the borrowers came back to us a second time to borrow money once again against the property. Lastly, another net lease situation in Minnesota. It's a Buca de Beppo restaurant. And first mortgage lien for us, another short-term loan. And again, you'll hear a little bit more about net leasing situations. In this instance, as with the Federal Express building and some of the other loans we've done around the country, they've been not only net lease situations, but they're with national tenants, Wendy's and different national tenants that are credit tenants. At this point, I'm going to turn everything back to Bridget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. I'm going to introduce Preet Sabharwal, who is, as you can read, a net lease expert and broker with SAP Capital, a commercial real estate brokerage firm with an emphasis on national retail and net lease properties. So Preet made the trip in from New York, so we appreciate you coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. So, just to give you some quick background, I'm not going to talk about myself the entire time, but I will give you some anecdotal points as to who I am and what we do. As Bridget mentioned, we are in New York City, and my career spanned across approximately $1.4 billion of transactions over the past decade. Including over 600 retail, net lease, industrial transactions across the country, from New York all the way to California, Hawaii, and Alaska. So I think today's focus is really going to be in regards to the state of the market. We are going to touch on net lease, retail, industrial, and a few other sectors. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with a little challenge. And I'm going to say 3,599. Does anyone know what that is? It's a lot. It's a good answer. That is the precise length of what everyone in this room has probably experienced to be the longest running bull market in recent economic history. So we're in a very unprecedented time. It's important to understand the facts. It's important to understand what the recent months and the recent years have brought us. Today's focus is certainly going to be around the fundamentals of the economy and how they relate to commercial real estate. So, in terms of commercial real estate in 2019, we all know what the past decade has looked like, specifically the past 3,599 days. We've seen massive levels of growth, both across companies, including retailers, manufacturing companies, distributors across the domestic lines. We've seen substantial changes in unemployment, and we've seen tremendous amounts of liquidity in the private banking sector. All of these have really created what we think of as a perfect storm for real estate. Three focal points. Strong employment market is certainly going to be one of the fundamental pieces of our economy today. So the relationship that we always tend to look at when it comes to commercial real estate is, where are consumers spending their money? Where's disposable income going? So that's certainly going to be one of the major factors in the pinpoints and the linchpins of why retailers are continuing to expand in today's world. We look at the lending market, and one of the major questions that we're asked on a day-to-day basis is, Preet, how long is this going to last? Is this sustainable? And the major responses and the factors that we take into account are certainly related to the lending market. And we do relate a lot of what's happening today with the past cycle. So if you take a look at the current lending cycle, you'll see that it's been quite a responsible cycle over the past decade. Lenders have not over-leveraged, and yes, you see some pockets of negative impact around the country. You might see some over-lending in certain markets to the degree of maybe 85 or 90% loan to value, but for the most part, on a very wide scale at the general macro level, we've seen some increased responsibility through the cycle, and really over the past decade, underwriting has been heavily scrutinized, and we've seen tremendous amounts of liquidity both in the private sector alongside with the institutional banking sector. A lot of the CMBS loans that we did see in the last cycle that were problematic have really been eliminated, in large part due to the first point, which is responsible lending. So if you look back at the last cycle, commercial mortgage-backed securities, which sometimes are looked at as the responsible party for a lot of the defaults, topped out at $350 billion in 2007. If you take a look at 2018, $150 billion. Substantial difference. So we do see that the growth in the commercial sector is quite sustainable. We do see that commercial real estate as a whole continues to be a healthy sector to invest in, and a lot of it does have to do with interest rates and liquidity in the market. In terms of national building, this is probably the piece of the pie that will most affect net lease. Everyone in the room is a consumer, and everyone in the room has watched retail change over the past decade. And you've got winners and you've got losers. And some of the losers, unfortunately, are household names, but so are the winners. So you see companies such as JCPenney and Sears certainly going into problematic situations, and other companies such as Toys R Us that have been household names in America for the past 40 or 50 years, entering into situations that no one could have expected 30 or 40 years ago. But at the same time, you do see companies which in 2010 or 11 or 12, we may have looked at them and said, hey, they're survivors. And they have done things that no one could have imagined. And those are companies like Dollar General and TJ Maxx and Costco and CVS, who in the wake of store closures with some retailers are continuing to develop and are actually the leaders in the marketplace for brick and mortar store development. We see other companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google, who were historically online based, and even they're entering now the brick and mortar space. So we're taking a very close look at national building and specifically at permits. We've looked at growth in the housing market and how it's led to further growth in the industrial sector, and we've also seen the relationship of the housing market and consumer spending. Here's the permit activity, and I think that this is probably one of the most stark figures that investors typically see. If you take a look at 2006, which inarguably is somewhere near the peak of the marketplace, you'll see that approximately 2.3 million building permits were open in the United States of America. You look back at 2018, we've seen about a 40% decline in building permits. So the most substantial aspect of this conversation is, where are the retailers going? And the answer to that question is, we are seeing a very heavy level of responsibility and some substantial distinction of differences between how retailers were selecting sites in the early to mid 2000s and how their expansion strategies have substantially changed. So we're seeing some smarter retailers, to put it simply, and we're seeing smarter warehouse distributors, and we're seeing smarter manufacturers, and we're seeing a responsible level of home building around the country. And again, you're going to see some negative impacts in small pockets of the country, but on a macro level, we seem to be in a place where there is still a runway, and the market is, we sometimes hear about it referred to as a baseball game, and what inning are we in? We seem to be somewhere in the top of the 6th inning. So we've got tremendous amounts of runway, and we do believe that this is a sustainable growth economy. We're going to talk a little bit about net lease. This is my favorite topic. It's what I spend every waking moment on, and 2018, again, was the biggest year for net lease transaction volume that we've ever seen. We looked at the peak levels of 2006 and 2007, and net lease continues to impress and set records across the board for transaction volume. Transaction volume for 2018 for a triple net lease property, $59 billion. The average cap rate in the sector, 6.34%. The average price point, about $4.5 million. And the transaction leader within the sector was restaurants. The number one question that we get within the net lease sector is, if interest rates rise, what happens to the value of the property? I'm going to answer that question. Simple explanation. Interest rates in 2014 for a 10-year fixed loan on a CBS with corporate credit would be approximately 3.75%. Interest rates today on that same CBS will be in the high 4% range. So you're looking at a 100 basis point shift in interest rates. The cost of money has gone up. The question is, where are cap rates? The average cap rate in the marketplace between 2017 and 2018 has changed by 1 basis point. It's gone from 633 to 644. I'm sorry, 634. The average change over the past 5 years, we've actually seen cap rates decline by about 30 basis points. And there was a lot of explanations and a lot of reasoning behind why investors were flocking to real estate, specifically the net lease sector. And we've all heard the term fleet to stability, and investors are certainly fleeing to stabilize returns. In this specific case, the core and the foundation of these net lease deals is guaranteed lease term and uninterrupted cash flow from very strong guarantors. The majority of the guarantors within the net lease sector that we operate with are companies such as CVS, Walgreens, Costco, Avita Dialysis, Starbucks, FedEx, Darden. A lot of these companies are very strong companies with revenues boasting in the billions of dollars. We're going to take a quick look and transition into some of these companies, and we're going to talk a little bit about the sector in more detail. The other question that we're getting, the second question we're getting is, but wait, I thought retail's dead. I thought retail's correcting. I thought retail's transitioning. So retail is transitioning, and we are in a state of change, and we are in a state of transformation. And we look at those winners and losers from 2008 and 2009 and 2010, And 2016 onward has really solidified the base of who the winners and who the transformative retailers are. And what we found is that investors are flocking to necessity-based retail. Investors are flocking to the retailers that everyone in this room at some point may need to frequent. Hard goods retailers are less in demand, and we are seeing a substantial amount of focus on pharmacies such as CVS, on industrial tenants such as Federal Express, as Gary mentioned, or FedEx Ground, on food concepts that are fast food in nature, casual dining in nature. We see Darden Restaurants as one of the major players in the arena. We see McDonald's, we see Chick-fil-A, Burger King as all concepts that are sustainable and considered net lease, necessity-based retailers. Gas and convenience is another sector that we find is feasible and seemingly sustainable in today's necessity-based world, where if you wanted to purchase a water bottle and a pack of chewing gum and maybe an orange juice on your drive to work one morning, you're not going to call Amazon or go on your app and order it. You're going to stop in at 7-Eleven. You might pump your car full of gas and pick up a few necessity-based items. So the market has taken all of this into account and really steered its focus onto these asset classes, specifically within the sector. Last but not least, we have medical office, and specific sectors within the medical space that we like are dialysis. We think the dialysis in certain parts of urgent care and surgery are very high in demand, and again, they're necessity-based retailers. These are, in some cases, centers that don't close for 365 days a year. And investors are certainly taking all of this into account. The trends for 2019 that we're seeing and we're really going to be focused on, as we said, we do believe that we're continuing to see fundamental strength within the commercial real estate market, and there is tremendous amounts of runway. There's going to be a high level of focus on interest rates, and there always has been within the sector. We're starting to see that as rates rise, cap rates have not moved. And historically, that has been a point of discussion, but we've now seen almost a decade of growth and sustainability and fundamental strength, and we have not seen cap rates move. And we finally have an answer for that. It's because of two reasons. Number one, retailers are not building like they were in the last cycle. So supply is certainly at the lowest point that we've ever seen. And number two, we are seeing a substantial amount of 1031 exchange buyer capital migrate from the management-intensive apartment sector into the management-free, very, very heavy credit corporate triple net lease sector. As that private buyer market continues to surge, and the Trump tax reform has certainly helped the 1031 exchange buyers rulings, we continue to see demand rise, and demand has really looked, like a hockey stick in the graph, and it's continuing to rise day by day. We are seeing a substantial amount of baby boomers selling out of their management-intensive apartment buildings and transition into some of these core credit Starbucks, 7-Elevens, CVS's, FedEx facilities. We are expecting that transaction volume for 2019 is going to continue to rise. 2018 was the most successful year for transaction volume for triple net leases, and we're excited for what 2019 holds. And we do believe that in terms of the economic standpoint, there's tremendous amounts of runway remaining, not only in the net lease sector, but overall in the commercial real estate sector. We will be here and available for any questions afterwards. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn this over to Paul. He's got a few comments to make. I know Desiree just stepped up, but if anybody sees a lovely 17-year-old girl, today is her birthday, and she came here tonight. So please make sure that you wish her happy birthday. And there's another gentleman in the back there who has a birthday tomorrow, Nick Norvell. So I know last year we had a gentleman who turned 95 on the day of our event, so it seems like this has also become a birthday event as well. So I will turn it over to Paul. Thank you.
I don't have a lot to say, but if people have any questions, the things have been a challenging year for a lot of reasons, which being in Rochester area, some of our borrowers, we have two major borrowers that we've done business with, had challenges. But what I did want to say is, besides the stock market changes, the political atmosphere, a lot of nervousness in many areas of people's retirement investments. I've always believed in my whole life in real estate. It doesn't go anywhere. We're a collateral-based lender. Things can have problems. We can have problems collecting money. Timeframes can change. But over time, there's value in something we should properly vet the value when we first start money. And so the stability, no matter what the market is, no matter where you are, if you understand what you're lending to, and you can like somebody, you can think their balance sheets look good, but the bottom line is it's the piece of real estate underneath. People can, I say anecdotally to my staff, people can get run over by a truck. And real estate doesn't go anywhere. And so I look at everything from that perspective. We've had some challenges with one of our larger borrowers in terms of having some bad press, but we're not having any challenges as far as getting payments. And we have had some challenges with some workouts with some other clients, but we haven't had any systemic problems that we can't address. We've got everything deal by deal, not what fantasies we can have what could happen, might happen. We have those plans for every single one, and how we move through it and how we can pay back. And that's where the crux of how we think. And again, we're collateral-based. We look at value. We don't look at just gee, this sounds like a good idea. Where we're tending to lean more into new outside business. The reason I had this group on New York come and talk last spring. I've known them for several years. I was doing some sales through them that I never really completed, but I ended up seeing that they were going into some new business models, some new structure, and it was an opportunity for us to do more triple nets, first mortgage business around the country with very secure properties for short term. My usual thing is 1 year, maybe two, maybe some extensions for problems, but their structure is more like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. A year would be a long time. And the thing is, we started doing more business with them and through some other clients, and we think it's a line of business that's it's very safe, it's very consistent, it's multi-billion-dollar companies with and things turn quicker, and I tend to like to see things turn quicker. I don't have a crystal ball with 5 years will be, but I certainly can see what the next 6 months look like, the next 3 months look like. And we've been not having any problems with our new loan structure, and this year we've lent out more. I don't know off the top of my head, but more than we've ever lent before, and we're very vested in a lot of things, and we're just very safety-minded and cautious about what we're doing. But if there's any questions people have, we can try to answer them. If anybody's...
Bridget talked about diversification. Is that something you've heard about?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get back to you with that. That's a good idea too, having a microphone. But we can get back to you exactly what that is. That's no problem. But I would say, we might have some concentration, say, with Morgan. In terms of they're not, let's say, they're not half our portfolio or anything, but we have a heavy concentration with Morgan because we've done a lot of business with them. But again, I look at the individual property. So in something we might list as Morgan, Morgan might be part of something. In other words, and I'll address it specifically. I mean, Morgan, if we have a deal in Florida, Morgan, we have a 20% of it, where it's with other people, other involvements with other people. And his name happens to be on some of it, but it's just we classify certain things in our accounting system. If a client touches something, or we have a substantial portion with somebody, we're definitely going to hit in our accounting system so that it stands out so we can see what percentage we have with them. But it's really property by property. I mean, we might have a property that we're having trouble with somebody, but then again, we have no trouble with any of the moving properties because of that at this point. So, I don't think. It's not so much borrowers, it's deals. I would say we have to have less concentration until we know how it shakes out with different organizations' life. You know, but I'm not looking to be too concentrated, especially with the stresses that are on different organizations. So something that might have been good 10 years ago, even though it might be a good piece of real estate. I give you an example. I've had like that house in Washington. It was a very good deal. But it first came to us, it was assessed for $18 million, they were paying $16 million, they wanted about $6 million, they were putting $10 million down. The first question I asked, why are they coming to us? You know, it's like, they're obviously well connected with a lot of people, they've got, assets, I think their assets were the tune of $70 million or more, something like that. And then, apprehensive, still, it doesn't matter how strong they look on paper and what the asset is and what's the story behind it too. We need to know. He's politically connected, he's in the oil industry, he's Nigerian, that in itself, to me, Nigeria, it's all your prejudices come forward to try to investigate and find out. He's a legitimate guy, he's well connected, it's down the street from Obama's residence. It worked out as a good thing, but we're going to be less, we have to be less exposed to, that was a major borrower, we have another major borrower that we dealt with. The two major borrowers we dealt with a lot, developed a lot in the city of Rochester. If you were here a couple of years ago, we talked about how they developed the city of Rochester to the departments. But, I want to address one thing on workouts. And we do have some workouts with one of our borrowers, our second largest borrower. And the thing is, I want to address how I look at workouts, is that we have the paperwork and the power to be very aggressive if we want to. But our process and procedure is to work through how to maximize the collateral, maximize the collection of it. It might take a longer time frame, but I'd rather get more money than prove a point. And so if we have a problem, our second largest borrower that I looked at a year ago was, it looked pretty bleak. But throughout the year, they fixed a number of projects, they partnered up with a number of buildings, they've enhanced their equity in different things, and they've strengthened their positions, which give us a better position to collect more, to be paid more regularly. So, we tend to make more when we work with people as opposed to just write it off and forget about it and move on. So it's the approach. I don't know if they can answer it enough, but we can give you anytime. We'll call anytime in the office, we give details. Any other questions?
First of all, just as a first-year investor, I'd like to thank you and the team for providing us this environment and dialogue. I think it's very useful for all of us. Thank you.
Okay.
Number two, you spoke about the potential 1% bonus. Is an individual investor, how do we look at how is that calculated?
Well, it's basically it's extra income that comes in, once they finish the audit, the way the debenture is structured, we pay 20% of the profits of the debenture go back to the investment pool that put their money in. So we share, the reason it's determined is based on how much income came in that year, and because it was, basically it's calculated that way. So like say a newer fund would be a little less of a bonus, by the time the fund matures, it's a little higher of a bonus, as long as there aren't any losses. Right now there haven't been any, substantial losses. There's plenty of equity in the fund. The way I've structured the fund, the venture fund, is we've kept all monies in the venture fund. And if there's any monies that we as owners of the fund can take out, we haven't taken anything out. We leave it in to reinvest. That reinvestment money makes profit, because that makes profit. All people that put money in share in that profit. So, it's not because I'm just altruistic, it's just because I'm a conservative person. Until everything's done, I'd rather have the assets sitting there to protect everything. So, we're more asset-based and we look at things in a conservative way. But Bridget can get you any details you want on that. I mean, it's I'll tell you, we feel we're working hard. It's nothing's just a walk in the park, but there's been some challenges this year, but we're working through them one by one. We're getting a lot of new business. We got, and I brought these fellas in from New York because they're a whole new line of business with a whole big diversification for us in a very secure fashion. And that's the only thing we'll ever do. But it's something that's a component of new things with multiple structures, as opposed to too much concentration in apartments or too much concentration in construction. Or, as I used to say all the time, which I haven't had to say lately, but like I've had some golf course loans in the past, and I look at a golf course like he was talking about dirt. I look at it as a golf course with a farm with holes in it. So it's like I don't like operating businesses, especially like real estate, per se, with concrete income streams. So these are what they are, and I have a lot of faith in this group. They've done a good job with it. I've seen them for several years operating. And but they call anytime. We're always available by phone or by meeting if you want to come and talk. We have closed the fund down because until we work out where we know where we're at with borrowers that are heavily invested in the fund. So we're going through that. I do not want new money coming in. I'm very comfortable everyone's going to get their money and get a return, but I'm not comfortable increasing that particular fund. But we are looking at going towards another fund and setting something up. I'm not saying it's going to happen in 2 months, but this year is something we're looking through to do that too. So there'll be more opportunity for yourselves or others to invest in other structures. There might be a little different structure where it's set diversification structure. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody. There's more food. The bar's open. Enjoy. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
No, I did not yet.
Okay, so he's M&T. He's
Great presentation.
Phil.
Frank.